My dear students and viewers, Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to our online class. I am Murshid Imam, Assistant Professor, Department of English, Government Shahid Sohrawardi College, Dhaka. Today I am here for the students of Honours Third Year, Department of English. My dear students, your winter vacation is over. I hope all of you have enjoyed the vacation and also continued your studies. My dear students, we were reading Preface to the Lyrical Ballads 1802 by William Wordsworth. In the continuation of our previous class, today we will read Appendix on Poetic Diction 1802. Hope all of you are ready to do the class. My dear students, at first I will talk about the purpose of the appendix. Okay. Then what is the purpose of the appendix? Yes, the appendix on poetic diction was added to the preface in the 1802 edition of the Lyrical Ballads. It was done because Wordsworth apparently felt that his views on poetic diction had not been made sufficiently clear. The confines of a preface was apparently too narrow to deal with the subject in detail. In the appendix, he sought to present an exact idea of what he means when he uses the term poetic diction. He also aims at tracing the origin and main features of the phraseology which he is strongly opposed to. Now, go to first para of the text on Appendix on Poetic Diction 1802. In the first para, we see that Wordsworth is saying that perhaps as I have no right to expect that attentive perusal without which, confined as I have been to the narrow limits of a preface, by meaning cannot be thoroughly understood, I am anxious to give an exact notion of the sense in which the phrase poetic diction has been used, and for this purpose a few words shall here be added concerning the origin and characteristics of the phraseology which I have condemned under that name. And so you see in the first para, the main points of first para is that Wordsworth here wants to give the exact notion of the sense in which he has used the phrase poetic diction. Okay, and he gives the origin and characteristics of poetic diction. And now go to second para of the text, that is the earliest poets of all nations generally wrote from passion excited by real events. They wrote naturally and as men, feeling powerfully as they did. Their language was daring and figurative. In succeeding times, poets and men ambitious of the fame of poets, perceiving the influence of such language and desirous of producing the same effect without being animated by the same passion, set themselves to a mechanical adoption of these figures of speech and made use of them, sometimes with propriety, but much more frequently applied them to feelings and thoughts with which they had no natural connection whatsoever. Language was thus insensibly produced, differing materially from the real language of men in any situation. The reader or hearer of this distorted language found himself in a perturbed and unusual state of mind. When affected by the genuine language of passion, he had been in a perturbed and unusual state of mind also. In both cases, he was willing that his common judgment and understanding should be laid asleep, and he had no instinctive and infallible perception of the true to make him reject the false. The one served as a passport for the other. The emotion was in both cases delightful, and no wonder if he confounded the one with the other and believed them both to be produced by the same or similar causes. Besides, the poet spoke to him in the character of a man to be looked up to, a man of genius and authority. Thus, and from a variety of other causes, this distorted language was received with admiration, and poets, it is probable, who had before contented themselves for the most part with misapplying only expressions which at first had been dictated by real passions, carried the abuse still further, and introduced phrases composed apparently in the spirit of the original figurative language of passion, yet altogether of their own invention and characterized by various degrees of wanton deviation from good sense and nature. And so, in the second para, we see that Wordsworth wants to say that in the past, poets used a highly figurative and metaphorical language, such as the language used by men in a state of high excitement. But this language was prompted by the actual emotion under which the poets had worked, or they had heard others who were in such a state of emotional excitement. The latter poets, however, used the language and artificial phraseology which they had themselves created. They misapplied these figures of speech without feeling the real passions and emotions. Okay, and it's the main point of para 2 of the appendix on poetic diction 1802. And now go to para 3. Okay, here Wordsworth is saying that it is indeed true that the language of the earliest poets was felt to differ materially from ordinary language, because it was the language of extraordinary occasions, but it was really spoken by men, language which the poet himself had uttered when he had been affected by the events which he described, or which he had heard uttered by those around him. To this language, it is probable that meter of some sort or other was early superadded. This separated the genuine language of poetry still further from common life, so that whoever read or heard the poems of these earliest poets felt himself moved in a way in which he had not been accustomed to be moved in real life, but by causes manifestly different from those which acted upon him in real life. This was the great temptation to all the corruption which have followed under the protection of this feeling. Succeeding poets constructed a phraseology which had one thing, it is true, in common with the genuine language of poetry, namely that it was not heard in ordinary conversation, that it was unusual. But the first poets, as I have said, spake a language which, though unusual, was still the language of men. The circumstance, however, was disregarded by their successors. They found that they could please by easier means. They became proud of modes of expression which they themselves had invented, and which were uttered only by themselves. In process of time, meter became a symbol or promise of this unusual language, and whoever took upon him to write in meter according as he possessed more or less of true poetic genius introduced his less or more of this adulterated phraseology into his compositions, and the true and the false were inseparably interwoven until the taste of men becoming gradually perverted. This language was received as a natural language, and at length, by the influence of books upon men, did to a certain degree really become so. Abuses of this kind were imported from one nation to another, and with the progress of refinement, this diction became daily more and more corrupt, thrusting out of sight the plain humanities of nature by motley masquerade of tricks, quaintnesses, hieroglyphics and enigmas. That's all about the third para of on the appendix on poetic diction 802. So here we see that Wordsworth is saying what that is the language of poetry became far removed from the real language of men, and so the use of meter enhanced this remoteness. And you see that is corruption of language increased, and meter became the symbol of this unusual and distorted language and diction. And it's the main point of para 3. Okay, and in para 4 we see that Wordsworth is saying that it would not be uninteresting to point out the causes of the pleasure given by this extravagant and absurd diction. It depends upon a great variety of causes, but upon none, perhaps more than its influence in impressing a notion of the peculiarity and exaltation of the poet's character, and in flattering the reader's self-love by bringing him nearer to sympathy with that character and effect, which is accomplished by unsettling ordinary habits of thinking and thus assisting the reader to approach to that perturbed and dizzy state of mind in which, if he does not find himself, he imagines that he is bucked of a peculiar enjoyment which poetry can and ought to bestow. Okay, and if I want to give you the main points of para 4, we can say that even this distorted language and artificial diction gave readers pleasures because it impressed a notion of the peculiarity. Okay, a notion of the peculiarity and exalted position of the poet's character. So an appreciation of such a language was taken to be a sign of exaltation. Okay, that's all about para 4. My dear students, in our next class we will complete the appendix, that is we will read para 5, 6, 7 and 8. Okay, so my dear students, I know you are very busy with your assignment of in course exam. Okay, I hope all of you will submit your assignment in time. And my dear students, today I don't want to give you any more homework because I had mentioned earlier that is you are very busy with your assignment. So after completing the appendix in our next class, I will give you the homework. My dear students, no more today. See you again in our next class. Wish you all the best. See you again.